Sean, you give me a signal when you actually have it on. Or is it on now? What? Good gardening, people. Today is the 5th lesson. Should have been the 6th lesson, but we had some problems yesterday. My technician was out. I was feeling rather poorly. We had an electrical storm that knocked out power for a while. Of course, I didn't know that was going to happen, but it would have knocked the class out right in the middle. And me trying to handle the technical things on my own, that would have been a total disaster. And the dog ate my homework. You know, what can I tell you? We just didn't get any taping done yesterday. We're going to do a makeup taping on Sunday. I don't think it'll be live, but it will be available like today's on our website, professor-giles.simplesite.com under recordings, which you can watch anytime you like at your leisure. That's the benefit of this class over going to college. You don't have to make those 8 a.m. Red eye classes. You can sleep in and watch them when you want to, or watch them when you get off work, or watch them whenever you want to watch them. But do watch them. After all, you paid the money, and I'm providing you with many gems of great information here. I'm going to try and cover quickly 2 subjects today. One is you drive the markets, which is why we have such really terrible fertilizers and other lawn products in this country, is because people are buying the wrong things. And the other one is a few of the basics about spring lawn care. I haven't talked too much about lawns yet. We will be getting into more about lawns because that is a driving force for many people, but we'll get into that later. Now, a couple of weeks ago, we planted some tomatoes. I showed you how in an aquarium, and I want to show you the sprouts that have already come up so you can see about where they are now. Go in for a close-up on the plants. You can see the little sprouts are coming up out of there. Now, I was disappointed in the golden, delicious mini tomatoes. Out of about 20 of them I planted, 0 of them came up. Of the other 2 red varieties, the Rutgers came up really well. That's what I just showed you. And the other cherry tomatoes came up almost as well, at about 75 to 80% germination. That's a good rate. But the golden little tiny ones were a hybrid with tiny seeds, and that's usually a recipe for disaster when you have both tiny seed and hybrid. You can expect low germination rates under those circumstances. But okay, so you drive the markets. I've often heard the following statement: fertilize? Why should I fertilize? Now look at the forests. Nobody's out there fertilizing those. Don't plants just get their food from, sunshine and rain and soil? I mean, there's giant trees out there. Nobody's fertilizing them. Yet you're telling me I should be buying fertilizer from your company. Well, first off, the trees in the forest are native plants. What you're planting in your yard are, for the most part, not native plants. They're not used to this environment, so it's a struggle for them to survive. But even if they are native plants, like the ones in the forest, the percentage of trees that go from the sprout to the giant oak is about 1 in 100, okay? And they're dying off the whole time in between. There's a fierce competition for resources in the forests. And of the trees you see there, you're looking at a huge number of them that don't make it. Now, if you want that kind of survival rate in your garden, 1 in 100 plants surviving, do what they do in the forest. Let Mother Nature take care of them. And pretty much I'm going to guarantee you any non-native plant you planted in your yard won't survive. It'll be a native plant that succeeds here. So again, if you want to plant something that doesn't grow naturally in your area and you're not feeding it, you don't have much chance of success. And we talked before about the food cycle. How do the plants out there in the woods get their food? Well, they get a little bit of it from rainfall. There's about 2% of nitrogen in falling rain. It catches the gas as it's falling through the atmosphere. And that food is available for about 2 hours after the rain hits the ground. And the plants gather it quickly. We used to call that poor man's fertilizer. You may notice after a rainfall, your lawn kind of gets a little jolt of growth. Well, that's the nitrogen that was in the rainfall. Unfortunately, it evaporates and turns back into a gas. So 2 hours after the water's here, it's no longer food. And 2% is not much food. It takes 1% nitrogen from the plant to process the food. So in essence, that's a 1% nitrogen level. That is starvation wages. Other things the plants eat are poop and pee from animals. That would include the insects, the birds, and other animals that live in the forest and come around the tree for food. A lot of times the insects are out there feeding and they're secreting, and then birds come and eat the insects and they're secreting, and so on up the food chain. So not all of the animals are coming for the plants, but they are coming there enough to feed that plant. Also, when the animal dies, as you can see in the picture, their corpse is very high in nitrates. Blood especially is very high, and crushed bone, which eventually the bone crushes and deteriorates, that has a lot of nitrogen in it too. And the flesh is full of micronutrients. So our bodies and our excretions feed the plants, then they feed us, and it goes around in a cycle. So we move on to fertilizers. I've covered some of this. You basically have two kinds, organic and inorganic. Some of the organics that I discussed before would include dried blood, which has about, I'd say, a 15 nitrogen to it, but it's very quick. It hits the plant, it dissolves, it pollutes. Not very much of that nitrogen winds up in the plant. So dried blood, better than most, but it's still a pollutant. Crushed cottonseed, it's got about a 10 nitrogen in it, and it does not wash out of the plant quickly. It sticks around. The plant gets every bit of the food that comes out of crushed cottonseed, but it gets it in such small quantities, you'd have to bury your plant a foot deep in crushed cottonseed for it to get enough food to survive. So its problem isn't that it pollutes, its problem is it doesn't feed fast enough. And then crushed bone meal, same story. It releases slowly, but it doesn't release enough food. Chicken poop, on the other hand, releases a lot of food in a big hurry. So it's a natural one that's highly polluting. Where I lived back in Virginia, the Chesapeake Bay was for the most part dead now because of all the chicken poop pollution, which was natural, and the lawn care pollution, which was not natural. The two combined to fill the bay with phosphates and nitrates and caused giant algae blooms that killed off all of the crabs, all the shrimps, all the shellfish, and most of the other fish. So what was once a booming paradise was destroyed by the worst of industrial and the worst of organic pollutants. So what we have to learn is how to use the ones that are good and avoid the ones that are bad. For centuries, it was just essentially urea nitrate, urine that had either been crystallized or in its raw form put into the field. Sometimes they'd water it down a little bit, but pretty much it was 45-00, urea nitrate. You can still buy bags of it in pellet form. Of course, it's controlled now because it's also bomb-making material. Timothy McVeigh used it to blow up the Oklahoma City Murrah building. And I believe in Beirut recently, a warehouse full of this stuff exploded, destroying several city blocks and damaging buildings miles away. The stuff is highly flammable and dangerous, not to mention highly polluting. So that was what was available before the 1930s for fertilizer. We then switched over to sulfur-coated urea, which is half of it urea nitrate and half of it a coated urea nitrate. So now you have about a 22 that releases right away, and another 22 that releases in about a month. Still pollutes, doesn't pollute as much, and you get a bang, nothing effect from the food. This is still the one that farmers love today. They have never gotten past the fact that it's cheap and that you only have to use it every couple of months. Also, the stuff that they use contains phosphate and potash, so that the numbers on the bag are going to be either 20, 20, 20, 15, 15, 15, or 10, 10, 10. Those are the three most popular fertilizers out there in the market, especially in the country. They're all bad. There are many things that have been developed since then that are far less polluting and better food. But try and tell that to the farmers. They won't listen. The only organic fertilizer that I really like is the fish oil or poop or skin or something from fish. If you use this stuff, it's full of micronutrients. It's still a great source of nitrogen food, but it supplies everything else that the plants need. So that would be the one I would recommend food with. And for the best food of the market, you want a slow release. Okay, in the 1950s, they developed this stuff, a polymer coated urea. It releases a little now, a little next week, a little, and so on, for up to 6 months. And 6 months is a pretty good deal. The stuff is a lot more expensive though. And because of that, people don't buy it. They just say, fertilizer's fertilizer. Or worse, they say, they don't need a fertilizer. So the plant suffers. This stuff doesn't pollute because it releases at a slow rate as the plant needs it, and none of it's wasted. It's the best result to use on your garden. Now, they've since developed something even better, which is a polymer-coated urea that is not, instead of released by water, it's fed on by microbes. Isobutadiene diurea, I've mentioned it before, but they don't even make it in this country anymore. It was so expensive that people decided they weren't going to touch it. Certainly the farmers aren't going to touch it. You can only get it manufactured in places like Germany or Japan. And so it gets imported to Canada, manufactured as a fertilizer there, and some places will import it here for golf courses and stuff. But it's a lot more expensive, and it would be a lot cheaper if more people manufactured it. If we had actual laws in the books that outlawed the older fertilizers, the cost of the higher tech ones would come down because all the companies would be forced to manufacture them here if they wanted to stay in business. It costs us as much to tool up to make one bag of fertilizer as it does to make 10 million. So I would love to see people petitioning their congressman and saying, we want high-tech, slow-release nitrogen fertilizers. The one that, a few of the names that I recommend, and those would be Osmocote, which is what we have here. It's also available up to 50-pound bags. Anderson's tree fertilizer is an excellent one that says tree fertilizer, but you can use it for anything. Lebanon golf course fertilizer is a good one. And then one called Agriform tablets. Those are the ones that off the top of my head, I would recommend as being excellent, slow release, non-polluting fertilizers. Ones to avoid would include Miracle Grow, which you've heard me badmouth before, and Scott's fertilizers of just about any kind. Now, the funny thing is, Agriform tablets were bought up by Scott's, so their name appears on the box, but they didn't change the formulation yet. It used to be owned by Everest. Now it's owned by Scott's, and it's expensive. One little tiny box is about $100. But that food is top-notch and non-polluting and lasts and lasts and lasts and lasts. So if you want to be non-polluting, go with that. Also, don't get anything that's a blue crystal or a liquid like Schultz. Those, they go right through the soil. They don't feed long, they leave salts. The key to look for on the label is water-insoluble nitrogen. The higher the percentage of that, the better the product is. And usually they'll say somewhere on the label, if it's really good, lasts 6 months. If you can find one like that, you found a good one. I've even seen some generics at Walmart that say that. They're not carrying them this year, though, at least not at my Walmart, unfortunately. Any rate, if you guys buy better chemicals out there and complain to your nursery that you don't want all this well advertised BS that they're stocking on their shelves, you can control the market, but we have to do it as a group. That means we have to educate our friends about what's good and what's bad. Well, enough said about fertilizers. You've heard me preach about it before, and I'm sorry if I'm beating a dead horse, but it's one of those things that really irritate me, that so many people are waving the green flag, but that's all they're doing. They're waving a flag. They're not actually helping anything. So now we're going to go on to talk about lawns and grass. And I don't mean the kind that's legal in 16 states now. I'm talking about lawn grass. And this is my message on lawn grass, which is a pretty simple poster. I've heard that my posters are too complicated to see online. You ought to be able to read this one. Lawn grass. Don't plant it now, okay? You say, what? It's springtime. We're supposed to plant grass in the spring. That's what Scotts tells me in their commercials, and that's what Rebel Grass Seed says. I mean, they're saying now's the time to get out there and plant that grass seed. Well, they're not trying to help your lawn. They're trying to help their investors. They're trying to help their corporate bosses pay for their Lear jets. And if they can get you to buy grass seed twice a year, one time failing and the second time you have a better chance, well, they're going to do that. So you're being conned. Do not try and plant grass seed in the spring. You say, well, it seems to come up good enough. And you're right. If you plant grass seed right now, you go out and overseed, you will get immediate good results. You'll see all kinds of new, beautiful grass. And in May, you're going to have a lawn that's the envy of the neighborhood. It will be beautiful. But it's like you planting a trek in the middle of the Sahara Desert. You better be taking a hell of a lot of water with you because you're going to need it. You probably won't have enough. Why? It's not that dry there in the spring. The grass seems to start well enough. Yes, but you're not growing any roots. The way the root system works in perennial plants is if it's winter or even early fall, roots are growing dramatically. They're partying like it's 1999 when the top of the plant is dormant. So if you see the top of the plant growing well, the roots aren't growing. And if you see the top of the plant growing well, then the roots are not growing. So all during the winter, the roots grow. In the springtime, they slow way down. In the summer, they don't grow at all. So here you come along with your grass seed, you spread it all over the lawn, you water it in good, it comes up like gangbusters, but there's no root. Got a lot of top on there, probably overcrowding it. Here comes June, temperatures go up. Now you have this thick, overcrowded juvenile lawn, prime candidate for fungus. You just gave your lawn a huge fungus problem. Half of it dies off right then and there. Now you have all these bare patches. Then comes July. No water. You have shallow rooted juvenile plants that are not hardy yet. The rest of the seed dies off. So everything you planted in the spring dies by the end of July. You wasted your money. You wasted huge amounts of water. You may be able to get some of it survive if you water religiously every single day in July. But why do that? The time to plant grass is in the fall. It is not in the spring. Remember one of the 10 rules of gardening. The plant lives in the root. It's not the top of the plant that counts, it's the root. And you won't get any roots if you plant in the spring. Now, what can you do if you got dead patches in your lawn in the spring? You got a wedding coming up in June and you want the lawn to look nice? Well, first off, I'd go out and rent myself an aerator or hire a couple of guys and have the whole thing aerated, dirt plugs taken out of the ground all over the place. Then I'd hire another guy with a manure truck full of aged manure, come out and spread it about 1/4 of an inch deep over the entire lawn. Now, when you water that, the manure is going to fill in the plug holes and you're going to have a nice, loam, deep, mineral-filled dirt down there with the root systems of the grass. That's going to do an amazing amount to make the grass thicken up. So if you have these little bare spots, the grass around it's going to grow right in there. It's going to be nice and thick over the dead spot. Now, suppose you have a huge dead spot in the lawn someplace. Well, you still don't want to plant grass seed there, not in the spring. You want to take a hoe, chop up the dirt a little bit, add some manure in there, mix it in good. Then you want to plant 2-year-old certified sod in on top of that grass, bare ground there, I should say. And you can tell if it's well aged or not. You pick up the sod when you're at the nursery and you give it a little pull. If it has a wire or a nylon netting inside of it, it's juvenile. It's quick grown and thrown on the market, and it's not mature yet. But if it's 2-year-old certified sod, when you put it down, it's already got a full root system, and it will grow fine. You got to water it every time for 2 weeks, every day for 2 weeks. And don't forget to fertilize in the spring. The grass needs another feeding about once every 3 to 4 months. And again, use only granular, slow release nitrogen. Other plants that you can plant in the spring that are perennial are things like roses or bushes or trees. Why? Because they already have a root system. You can plant something with a root system in the spring. Now, it's not going to get any more roots till the fall comes along or winter, but they'll survive okay on the roots that they have when you transplant them in. Seed, on the other hand, like I said, it starts with nothing. It's got no root. It's not going to get any root until it's already been through the harshness of summertime. So it's okay to go out and buy your rose bushes. It's okay to go out and buy your shrubs, but it is not okay to plant grass seed. Any rate, so that's the way you can compete with your neighbor really well, is instead of overseeding in the spring, and I don't recommend overseeding at all. I like to take the existing grass and thicken it, not try and overcrowd it and turn it into a grass slum. Any rate, you don't want the fungus conditions that are created by the thickness there. And that's what happens when you use juvenile grass and plant it too thick. You create a nightmare. By midsummer, your whole lawn looks like it's been hit by Agent Orange rather than the pretty lawn you were imagining. It turns into a lawn making nightmare. At any rate, you may also still find you have some bare spots regardless. And those could very well be because you're trying to plant in shady areas. We have a minimum of 2 hours full direct sunlight hitting a spot of ground unfiltered by trees to grow any kind of grass. You have to grow a small fescue in those areas that are only getting 2 hours of sun. A small fescue is a shade-loving grass, but it still needs at least 2 hours of sun between 11 in the morning, 5 in the afternoon to survive. If it gets much more than 3 hours of sun, it'll fry because it prefers a shady area. But for all other types of grass, including all those southern grasses like zoysia and St. Augustine, they need at least 4 full hours of direct sunlight hitting the ground in that area for them to grow. You can't have it filtered through the trees. But morning sun doesn't count toward that except that 1 hour between 11 and noon. But if you're not getting that much sun there, then the grass is going to slowly fail. If you're trying to plant under a tree, it's a bad idea. Trees need acidic soil. Grass needs neutral pH. Trees tend to make a lot of shade. Grass needs the full sun. So planting under a tree with grass is a bad idea. Well, what if you have a big shady yard that doesn't have 4 hours of sunlight? Well, there's a plant called liriope. Liriope looks like grass pretty much. It's kind of a thick bladed, but it doesn't get more than 6 inches tall. It grows really slowly, and it'll grow in full shade. Liriope is available in little plugs. They're kind of pricey, but you plant them in plugs every foot or so in a shady area, you fertilize and water normally, and over a long period of time, and I'm talking a couple of years, it will spread out and turn into what looks like a nice thick lawn. For those of you who don't want to wait that long or find the price of liriopy a bit high, which it is, I would recommend ground cover like periwinkle. I found that periwinkle is a nice little short growing vine, doesn't look a thing like grass, but has a pretty little purple flower in the springtime, and nothing will kill it. In fact, if you ever want to get rid of it later, too bad, you're stuck with it. I find it to be practically indestructible. So those are some of your options for shady areas in the grass. And so I've kind of covered pretty much all the material that I wanted to go over today. And on Sunday, I'm going to be making a special taping. I don't know that I'm going to be showing it live, but it will be posted at my site just as soon as I can. I still have some catch-up work to do on class notes, and I'm going to do the posters as well. That's all coming down the pipe. Just things are happening here pretty fast, pretty crazy time of year. And I got to get my own garden put in. I need to get out there and spade. That's what I'm going to be doing Sunday, and showing you some techniques if I can get it all done. But at any rate, again, people, keep watching my tapes. You're welcome to show them to your friends. And if you ever can, come and join us in the class. You can also send your questions to the same website right here under class questions, and I'll answer them as quick as possible. Thanks for coming again. Good gardening.